Welcome to another episode of Tales from the Bridge. In this episode, Gareth L. Powell joins Marty and myself on the bridge, and we have a great conversation. We really hope you enjoy this one. Check the show notes for links to Gareth's website and his blog, and follow him on Twitter. There's a few things down there, so check it out. Find out what Gareth is up to next. All right, everyone's waiting for us. Let's make our way over to the bridge.
We are very pleased to have on the show today Gareth L. Powell, who is known for his action-packed sci-fi thrillers and space operas. He's the author of 11 novels and over 40 short stories and novellas, which have been gathered into 2 collections, as well as a non-fiction book about writing. His novel Akak Makak won the British Science Fiction Association Award in 2013, and he won it again a second time in 2018 for Embers of War, which is the first of a trilogy that is now being adapted for television. In 2021, he released a book with Peter F. Hamilton called Light Chaser, followed in 2022 by Stars and Bones, the first book in his new continuance series. And in April, he will release the second book called Descendant Machine. Welcome to the show, Gareth.
Hi.
Great to have you. Well, we recently, we do 2 kinds of episodes here on the show. One is, we sort of do like a book club, or read a book and then we talk about it, and then we do interviews like this. So one of the most recent books that we've talked about was Salvation by Peter F. Hamilton. So, and I've been reading Peter F. Hamilton for decades. So I thought we'd love to know what it's like to write a book with Peter F. Hamilton. How was that?
It was actually a lot of fun. Peter and I did quite a number of live events together, where one of us would interview the other one in front of an audience and so on. And, I interviewed him for the British Science Fiction Association, and then a year or so later he interviewed me, and we did various book launches and stuff together. So we were hanging out a lot, and I think it was me, I'm not sure, suggested, hey, one of those things writers say, like, hey, maybe we should write something together sometime. And Peter was totally up for it, and so we started just, spitballing ideas. I had a character and a vague plot that I'd been kind of working on for a while, and so I sent it to him, and he suggested some changes, and then sent it back, and he said, we sent it back and forward, and each of us coming up with new and different things, and then eventually I went round and we sat in his study, and we just blocked the story out into scenes, and literally sat there and go, well, if you write those bits, I'll write these bits, and then he wrote the first chapter and sent it to me, and I read it, and I was like, wow, I'm the first person reading a new Peter Hamilton story.
Yeah.
This is amazing. And then, I wrote the second chapter and sent it back to him, and then he sent back the third chapter and so on. So we did it very much like tossing it backwards and forwards between us so that we could keep track of the flow of the story. I think if we'd just gone away and written our scenes by ourselves and then tried to push them together, it wouldn't have felt as cohesive. So we wrote it back and forth like that, and then we both went back and edited each other's bits and stuff. So it kind of, although I think you can tell who wrote which bits, there's still a kind of blurry line in places where we've both edited the same bit of text and we both put our own spin on it. So I think it worked very well because he writes very, very long books and I write fairly short, snappy books.
Right.
So we were able to kind of mesh our styles quite unexpectedly well. Really.
Yeah. So. I imagine you've been reading him for a long, long time. Was he like a mentor of yours, or like a childhood hero, or was it?
I read The Reality Dysfunction was the first one I read of his. Probably around, can't remember exactly when it came out, but probably around the turn of the millennium, somewhere back then.
Right.
And, he was, one of the big stars in the firmament, as I so to actually be sitting there and working with him was a moment of profound imposter syndrome at one point. So
yeah, I bet.
It's like, who let me do this? So yeah.
Oh, that's great. Who else do you know or hang out with in the firmament of science fiction? I imagine you know some other people.
Oh yeah, I'm very good friends with quite a few. Adrian Tchaikovsky, Emma Newman, Paul Cornell. Yeah, a lot of my close friends now are other writers.
Right.
We seem to have come together over the sharing trials and tribulations of this kind of life, and meeting up at various events and conventions and things. You start to realise suddenly that most of your friends are actually in the business.
Right,
So.
right. Yeah, I saw on your webpage
For sure, yeah.
that you go to a lot of conventions. Are you usually in the UK, or do you come across the pond here to the fan expos and things?
I've not been to a US convention yet, but now that I'm planning to live in California from the summer, because I've just got married to the writer J. Diane Dotson, who's from Los Angeles.
Oh, wow.
So we're going to set up home in LA, and so hopefully I'll get to go to a lot more events over in the States. Usually, the conventions I've been to have been in Europe and the UK, so it'd be nice to try the US flavor for once.
Wow. Well, that's exciting.
Well, yeah, you've got one of the biggest conventions in the world, really, the Comic-Con in San Diego, just a few hours from LA. So make your way over there if you don't mind being shoulder to shoulder to a million strangers.
Yeah, Diane's done some panels at Comic-Con before, so she's well versed in how it works, and so I will try and get down there with her this year.
Yeah.
Well, you're not kidding that
Well, that's an exciting change.
your social group has become writers since you just married one. Congratulations. Yeah. That's great.
And the West Coast has many writers. We've spoken to Shauna Maguire, Greg Bear, formerly from the West Coast, and then Kim Stanley Robinson's West Coast. There's a lot in the Portland area, California area, a lot of fantastic science fiction writers, and of course, filmmakers that are doing television shows and making a lot of pretty amazing stuff. Is that one reason that you're going down there? Did you want to connect more with filmmakers, and one of your books is being adapted by a fellow who I believe was directing some of The Expanse? So there's a connection there.
That's a happy coincidence. I mean, I'm going over there because that's where Diane's from, and I'm moving over there to be with her. But the fact that the director and screenwriter and studio who are adapting my Embers of War trilogy for television at the moment are based there will obviously be very handy indeed, and can makes it a lot easier to work with them and to work with people in that industry as well as in publishing.
And are you experiencing work, like, do you guys work together on that, or do they say, leave the scripts to us, we'll do the screenplay, you've done the book, you've done enough, and they kind of just say, your hands off now, we'll take care of it? Or do you want to get involved there?
They've produced a script which I've read, and it's absolutely fantastic. I didn't really have any input into that particularly. The director and the screenwriter pulled it up, but they've stayed very, very true to the characters and true to the tone of the book. So I'm absolutely thrilled with that, and their plans going forward and what they expect it to look like are fantastic. I'm actually executive producer. I have no idea what that entails, but I'll be around kind of if they need to ask questions and consult on various bits of the story. But it's a very different medium than novels, and it's the medium these guys know, so they will be taking the artistic decisions and they will be writing the scripts. If they let me write an episode in season 2 or something, I'd be very happy with that. But at the moment, it's not my milieu. Mine is writing novels, and theirs is putting images up on the TV screen. So it's one I'm interested to learn about, but I trust them to do a good job.
Well, that's really exciting. That's neat. Can you tell us more about how that happened for you? How do you get your book made into a TV show?
Well, I mean, not long after the first book came out and it won the BSFA award and I think it was shortlisted for the Locus. And my agent received a query from the studio saying we'd like to take an option on this book. So, that was it. And then they brought in the script writer, and then they found the director, and so on. So it was literally as simple and as complicated as that.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's great, because we talk to a lot of science fiction writers, and I know a lot of books get optioned much more often than they actually get made into a movie or a TV show. So that's super exciting. I gather one of the main aspects of being an executive producer is getting paid. So that's great. That's good. Hey, speaking of Embers of War, I've been listening to the audiobook, and I just have a little section here that I thought I might read. We like to read a little bit from the books of the authors we talk to give our listeners a flavor of the writing and of the book. So if you don't mind, I'll do about 2 minutes of that. Okay. 10,000 years ago, the solar system we know as the Gallery had been a remote and unremarkable place, just a small yellow sun with 7 perfectly ordinary planets. Then sometime around 10,000 years ago, those planets had been carved into 7 immense sculptures, and nobody knew why or by whom. Arriving on the scene 6,000 years after their fashioning, human explorers had named the carvings according to their shapes. Counting outwards from the sun, they became known as the teardrop, the jagged bolt, the brain, the inverted city, the dodecahedron, the flared goblet, and the broken clock. Even now their significance remained a mystery, but as they had endured for so many millennia, I hoped I would be able to find among them a way to throw my personal history into some sort of perspective. Through contemplation and the act of writing, I intended to stack my handful of days against the vastness of 10,000 years and thereby exorcise their pain. And maybe by seeing the objects through Adam's young eyes, I could achieve that. The first object we were approaching was the brain. It is a fat ovoid the size of Mars. Like the other objects, it started life as a reasonably commonplace globe. Then the sculptors, using some unimaginable technology, reshaped it, etching deep and convoluted designs into its surface. The largest lines are the size of canyons, the smallest no wider than a few centimeters. Together, they form an intricate, planet-sized labyrinth of exquisite complexity with no identifiable beginning or end, no entry point or center. So that sounds like great material for TV. I can't wait to see that. That's amazing. What a big idea. What a spectacular, huge scale kind of to think about. Yeah, can you tell us more about Embers of War and where that goes and the characters involved?
Ever wondered what it takes to make it in the movie business? Peel back the curtain with 4-6 Success Filmmaking. 4-6 Success Filmmaking is where filmmakers share their stories and the secrets.
It's beyond competitive out there.
There have been movies that it's taken me 10 years to get made.
Don't wait to create. You've got to just keep making stuff.
Tune into 4-6 Success Filmmaking for your dose of cinematic realness, direct from the voices that have lived it.
Well, without revealing too much, the story revolves around a sentient warship called the Trouble Dog. And 3 years before the novel starts, there's this war between 2 human factions, and the war is finished by a huge atrocity, which shocks both sides into peace. So it ends the war, but it's absolutely unforgivable. And Trouble Dog is one of the perpetrators, but at the time she is simply a warship fulfilling her orders. After the event, she starts to develop a conscience, and she resigns and joins an organization dedicated to rescuing space travelers in distress, kind of like cross between like the Red Cross and Thunderbirds or something. And when a space liner goes missing in this bizarre solar system that you've just read the description of, she gets involved in a conspiracy which threatens to undo the fragile peace and to unleash more chaos and war on the universe. So she's going to have to learn how to. She's going to have to relearn how to fight, and that's kind of in a nutshell the kind of the basis of the first novel, and then things lead on and change, but the main thrust of the trilogy is her journey to redeem herself, I guess, and to become her own person.
I hear echoes of Look to Windward there, with a lot of this, the ship that causes this great big war, or participates in the war and then redeems itself by caring for and saving humans. Neat. Have you read a lot of Ian M. Banks? Did you know Ian when he was alive?
I met him once or twice. I couldn't say I knew him.
Right.
Kind of. I sat next to him once when I was when I only had one book out, at a mass signing of authors at a convention, and I was sat next to Ian Banks. So I was sat there with my one book, and about 7 people queued up to see me, and he had about like 70 stretching out the door and around the thing, and people were coming back time and time again with like 5 more books, and so I was, I spent most of the time just sat there twiddling my fingers. But when I got up to leave, I said, it's been a pleasure sitting next to you. You obviously had a lot more work to do than I did. And he said, look, don't worry about it. Once upon a time, I sat next to Pratchett. So
Nice. That's a good story to have. Well, speaking of being a young writer, I know you've written a book about writing. It's called About Writing, and you're known to sort of give advice to young writers on how to get started. Can you tell us a little bit about that? What advice do you give people starting out on this track?
Well, I mean, obviously at one point I was a young writer, and I had to find out a lot of things myself the hard way. When I started out, I had no idea what the passive voice and the active voice was or anything like that. I just knew how to write, essays for school or whatever, and what I had absorbed through reading for my life. So I kind of had to discover how to get an agent, how to format a manuscript, all of this. I did all this research. So I thought I would share that as I went along. So I had a blog, and I would put up like, this is what I found out about this today. This is what I learned. And eventually I had this huge blog full of bits of advice, and I thought, right, I'll download the individual blog posts for safekeeping. So I put them all into a Word document, and it came out to like 50,000 words or something. So I thought, wow. And I tweeted, I think I've just accidentally written a book. And Francesca from Luna Press tweeted back and said, I'll publish it. So we got chatting, and it came out in a small paperback, sort of pocket-sized edition, which proved very popular. And then Gillian Redfern, the editorial director of Gallant's in the UK, said we would really like to do a hardback expanded version of this book. So she bought the book from Luna Press, and I wrote another 25,000 words, and we re-edited everything, put it in different order, and we published it in hardback last year. And I'm really pleased with it. It's not like a prescriptive book saying this is what you must do. It's just like, these are the options, these are what you might consider, this has worked for me, and so on. So it's more like a friendly, I hope it comes across more like a friendly chat than a stern schoolmaster telling you what to do. So yeah, I'm very pleased with it, and it's kind of, I think it's been popular because on Twitter way back in 2016, which seems like, after all we've been through over the last few years, that seems like just after the last ice age or something. But back in 2016, I just started helping people on Twitter because it was becoming so toxic. I thought I'd just put out a tweet saying, any writers out there I can help anything with. And it got a huge response. So every now and then I just do like little Q&As for aspiring authors. So if they come and say, how do I get an agent, or where do I where do I go to find this and that? Then I can just give them a quick answer on Twitter, and just kind of pay back to people coming up the greasy pole behind me. So it's working quite well, and I hope the book is of great use, because I think it's the book I needed when I started out. So,
And for writers that would love to find that, what's the easiest place to find that? On your website, Gareth? Or
yeah, there's a link to it on my website. It's on Amazon in the UK, but I think it's actually being published in the US in a month or so. So,
nice,
but
excellent.
you can order it from the UK or direct from Glance.
Very cool. I did notice looking through your Wikipedia page, and maybe I'm wrong about this, but you wrote a lot of short stories, and I think before you started writing novels, or maybe they overlap. Is it very different? The world of writing novels and getting published, getting an agent, what we've just been talking about, compared to publishing short stories?
Yes, it's very different. I mean, the majority of the short stories I wrote were when I was starting out. It was me experimenting with voice and subjects and tones and finding my voice, really, and finding how to write good prose, or at least, serviceable prose. And once I started working on novels, the number of short stories I wrote tailed off quite considerably. It is a very different kind of form, because short stories are more kind of about ideas, and novels are more about characters, on the whole, because you don't necessarily have space in a short story to really delve into a character and create someone who readers will follow for a long time. Whereas if you're writing a trilogy of novels, you really have to dig deep and find a character that people will follow through that kind of huge journey. So it was good, and I think it was an ideal training ground for me to work up to writing a novel. And I think it also got my name out there once I started to be published in genre magazines, that editors and agents could keep an eye on the people coming up through the magazine scene, so they were aware who I was when I had my first novel ready, and I could go out and talk to them. They knew who I was, and where I'd come from, and had some flavour of the kind of thing I was doing. So it was an extremely good way into the business.
Mm-hmm. How many years were you writing short stories before your novels?
I wrote I wrote a first draft of a novel in 2000 to 2002, and then I put it aside and I started writing short stories. And I think I had my first professional sale of a short story in 2006, so about 4 years later. And then that novel came out in 2010, so about 8 years after I finished the first draft. So yeah, and then it was all novels after that.
Something I'm interested to know, Gareth, is Titan Books are publishing your more recent books, and they're a great little company. They put out a lot of movie tie-in books as well. I've read some of their Alien books and the Planet of the Apes. Are they a company, or has any publisher come to you and said, "Could you write us a short story for this massive franchise?" Is that something that interests you? And if so, is there a franchise you'd love to write for and make your own stories for?
Um, it's something obviously I've discussed with my agent and thought about. Yeah, the right opportunity hasn't come along at the moment. I mean, part of me would love to write a Star Wars story, or a Star Trek, or a Doctor Who, or something like that. But at the same time, I prefer concentrating on my own work and my own universe, and my agent says, don't dilute the brand. So but I think it could, if I found something that meshed with my own kind of style, then possibly. But I have no desperate urge to go and play in somebody else's sandpit at the moment.
Hey, I noticed on your webpage you have this widget that I've never seen before, and it's to buy you a coffee. How does that work? Is this a way for fans to connect with you and go for a coffee with you, or just send you a message that you'll read? Do you drink those coffees?
Yeah, it's a crowdfunding website called Coffee, but KO-FI. So, which I keep pronouncing Ko-Fi for some reason. Yeah, so it's a crowdfunding website like Patreon, where people can just donate you a one-off payment of like $3 or something for a coffee if they like what you're doing, or they can sign up monthly and give a monthly donation. It's like a tip jar, really. So yeah, I've just had it up there to help me, keep the wolf from the door.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. Okay, that's great. Yeah, I had misinterpreted that the tip was for the person making the coffee. That is for you.
No, that's just their shtick rather than kind of support the author. It's just, if you like what they're doing, buy them a coffee. So, and it's very appreciated, and I do enjoy those coffees. So.
Oh, that's great. Well, maybe you could tell us about your most recent book. So I think Descendant Machine is coming out in April 11th in the UK, I expect, and maybe at the same time in the US and Canada. Why don't you just tell us about what that's just to give her? I gather that it's in the series, the continuance series, but they're not necessarily sequels. Or that you can read them independently. Tell us about that.
That's right. They're two books set in the same universe, but they're separated by about 50 years, and there's no real crossover of characters. So they're kind of, you can read them as separate stories. You'll get more from the kind of the background, having read both of them together, but they work equally well independently. They're set in a universe where humanity got kicked off the Earth by a benevolent alien species who were appalled at the mess we'd made, and kicked us off the Earth and set us adrift in 1,025-kilometer long arcs, with strict instructions. We're not allowed to mess up any other planets, so we can go out and we can kind of drift around the universe, but we're not allowed to interfere with other biospheres. So the story of both books involves scout ships that go out ahead of this fleet to scout out the territory and get into various kinds of trouble. And in Descendant Machine, there's they find an alien race who live on a planet, and in their solar system is this Saturn-sized object with a sort of Saturn-sized black sphere, and around the sphere is like a ring of machinery keeping it closed, and nobody knows what it is or who built it or what it's for or even what's inside this big black globe. But there is a faction in this species that wants to open it to find out, because they convince themselves it's going to be like a high-tech wonderland, and they're going to, it will make their species great again, and they will dominate the universe and all of this. And there's another faction who co-opt this human scout, who are desperate to keep it closed because they think it's holding in something really, really catastrophically dangerous. And the only person who really knows the secret is a reclusive holy man from that species, and he is currently on this giant alien megaship several light years away in seclusion. So there's a race between the two factions to go and find this guy, and to find out what the great secrets are that he knows before the machine opens and whatever is inside is unleashed. So it's a bit of a race with a great big kind of secret ticking time bomb in the middle. April the 11th. That's coming out in the US and the UK. So.
And what are you working on now?
I'm working on another space opera set in a whole new universe again. So I'm about a third of the way into that at the moment. So we'll see how that goes.
I just see that you have listed your top 30 essential science fiction space operas. And I'd like to have you know that I think we've read about 6 of them in our on our show alone. So these are fantastic reads. We must like space operas, Marty. But Gareth's list is fantastic. I just linked it from your you sharing it on your Twitter. But number one is Accession by Ian M. Banks. Half of us on the show love Ian M. Banks. Would you say that Accession is Ian's best? Or is that just a part of the space opera category?
Yeah, I'm not sure it's his best. It's one of my personal favourites, but I think the list is talking about books that had influenced my space opera writing. Accession is the one that's most overtly space opera with it's got the big ships blowing the hell out of other big objects and all sorts of things. So that's why I went for that one. If I was writing a list of best science fiction, I may have chosen one of his other novels. I mean, I particularly like Hydrogen Sonata, the last one. It's one of my absolute favourites. So, but that was the one that I thought was most germane to that particular list. Yeah.
And then Ancestral Night by Elizabeth Bear is number two. We just love that book, and the second one as well. That was such a great one. Elizabeth is really special. We love her work.
Yeah, I really enjoyed that one. I mean, the list isn't in any particular order; it's only in the as I thought of them order. So
Okay.
there's no like implied ranking going on here. But yeah, but it was. I really did enjoy that one. I enjoyed the kind of the character's narration, and it was a lot less portentous than the narration in some space opera. It was quite irreverent and fun. So.
Oh, it's fantastic. Well, I know we've read a lot of these, and then you've got some on here that are on my list, such as A Fire Upon the Deep, which is, I think Kevin read that recently, and it's been one that my brother's been talking about for many years, and I got to pull the trigger on that one very soon. And then also Planetfall by Emma Newman. You've got some good ones on this list, and that is GarethLPowell.substack.com. And I guess you do more blogs on here than that, right, Gareth?
Yeah, Substack's my main blogging platform.
What's something that you'd like to share with our listeners that we haven't asked you?
I don't know. I guess Descendant Machine is pretty special to me because it marks a milestone. It's my 10th novel, so that feels like when I was first starting out as a creative writing student at university, I never thought I would have the wherewithal to write an entire novel. I didn't think I could keep that up, and I have sort of ADHD symptoms, so I never thought I'd be able to concentrate that long. And to actually be at a point now where I'm suddenly sitting there holding what is my 10th novel seems like a huge milestone, just a huge personal milestone. I mean, I know there are people who, Michael Moorcock wrote about 800 gazillion novels or whatever, but, that it's my 10th and it feels like a really big milestone for me. I mean, and going on to my 11th now is just, it's beyond what I ever thought I would achieve when I set out. So it feels pretty good.
And then to see the possible work scripts and directors and a TV show, that must be a whole new level of excitement. And then being in LA, I mean, you're doing a nice turn in events here that must be pretty exciting.
It's exciting and terrifying, and I just really hope this TV show comes off. The current state of play is that they're waiting to pitch to a network, so I just hope everything's in place. All we need is for a network to say, yes, absolutely, here's a very large suitcase of money, go away and make it. So in which case I get a nice big payday and I get to see at least a pilot episode of something based on something I've written up on TV. So I'm very much on the edge of my seat about that one. So.
Well, it'll most likely be filmed in Toronto, just because they're filming all the sci-fi shows up here now. There's studios popping up all the time, and just a lot of a lot of Hollywood moving up to Toronto.
That's great. We'd love to see it if you end up being up here. What's your favorite TV show? Sci-fi show? What are you watching these days?
Oh, I've been through a period this year of and last year of just binge watching stuff. I've just finished the Umbrella Academy, which was a lot of fun, and before that, I did A For All Mankind, which was absolutely superb.
I love that show. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so well done. It's so cleverly done the way they weave the like real footage and events into the old history footage and events. Oh, it's so impressive. But as well as that, both versions of Cowboy Bebop.
Yeah.
I love the anime, so I've watched that a couple of times, and then I watched the live action one as well. And it's a different beast, but it's still fun, and it's kind of it I think it was getting into its stride, and it probably needed another season to kind of really get into, but we live in quite merciless times now, and whereas a lot of in the past shows would have a couple of seasons to really find their footing and get going, and now it's you can be cancelled after half an episode. And there's some shows cancelled before they even air now, so it's crazy. But what else? What else? Oh, and I recently binged the whole of The Expanse as well. So I bounced off it a couple of times, but then I finally sat down and watched it all the way through, and it was fantastic. I've read the books, so I think that's why I had trouble getting into the show, because I'd already read the books. But once I got in, I found it's a really, really good adaptation, and they've taken the heart of the story from the books and kind of trimmed away all the excess and just stuck to the heart of the story, and I think it works really well. So, yeah, I mean,
that's great.
Those are the ones I've recently,
Yeah, well, it must be a little scary, like you said, right? Having your own work made onto TV, because we live in this sort of golden age of science fiction TV. I mean, there's so many great shows all the time, and you're right. You have to be at the very top of the stack, or you're not going to get past one season. So,
yeah, absolutely. And big shows with lots of spaceships and effects and everything are obviously very expensive to make, so we have to really present them with something very special. So
yeah.
Something I'm really curious to know, Gareth, is just within the last few weeks, what's been happening with AI and writers and journalists and fiction writers even. What do you think's going on, and do you see the outcome? Do you see what the future looks like when it comes to what we're talking about here, or what's your take on that?
there's quite a bit of confusion because of the term artificial intelligence, AI. What this isn't artificial intelligence. It's not intelligence. It's basically the same as on your smartphone, when if you have predictive texting and you type in, I am, and it suggests home, or I am on my way. It's basically a very complicated version of that. Whereas if you give it some prompts like write a story about a dog, it will go away and look at its data set of everything about dogs and everything about stories, and fiendishly complicated kind of pattern matching. It will spit out some text about a dog, and it's far more advanced than anything that a lot of us saw coming even a year ago. And it's being touted by a lot of people as a way to produce cheap content. And so I was at a university yesterday talking about this, and universities are having to come up with a way to cope with the fact that a lot of students will be writing essays by plugging subjects into this thing and having it spit out an essay and handing that in instead of actually doing any work themselves. I've also know a writer in the UK who has lost one of her jobs writing articles for a website, because the website owner has decided that they're just going to write articles using this chatbot from now on. But the drawbacks to it is that A, the articles it produces aren't very well written, and B, they aren't always accurate. One of the professors yesterday was telling me that a friend of his is getting phone calls and emails from people trying to find this paper that he is credited as having written that he never wrote, but the chatbot has made up this paper that he wrote and cited him. And so it becomes dangerous then, because once this hits Wikipedia and people start posting up these auto-generated Wikipedia articles, there are going to be glaring errors in there, and it's going to really make it very difficult for us to understand objective truth online, because these chatbots will be citing each other and citing each other's articles, and so it will be like a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy of a photocopy, where things get worse and worse and worse, and it's going to be a huge problem. In the writing sphere, there's a couple of magazines that have had to close their submission windows because they're getting deluged by short stories that people have written by typing into like ChatGPT, write me a short story about a rocket ship, or write me a sci-fi short story, and then emailing it to these magazines in the hope of this kind of get rich quick, become an author without doing any work kind of ideal, which is is terrible. And in a couple of years, they're going to be in a couple of months, Amazon is going to be absolutely swamped with self-published books that have been written by this. I keep calling it AI, but have been written by people who've just plugged stuff in and printed it out and self-published the book. So that's going to make it very, very hard for self-published authors to get noticed. And it's basically, there's a Sturgeon's law, which is that 99% of everything is shit, and this is going to absolutely, turn that up to 99.9, because it's going to absolutely deluge us with this soulless, auto-generated crap. I mean, it's like, I don't know, I can't think of an example, but it's just this huge. I don't think we even know the ramifications of it yet. But it's certainly something that has scared the pants off writers and artists, and is being seen by a lot of kind of business and content providers as just a cheap way to cut costs and get stuff out. But for a lot of writers, it's our livelihood. So it's we're kind of feeling like, I guess we're feeling like craftsmen, carpenters when somebody invents IKEA, and it's it's a strange and interesting time.
Yeah, it is. I can only imagine. I would hope that it turns into more gratitude and hopefully revenue for artists and writers. That the quality now is much more important. That we've got, if we do have 99.9% shit, then that 0.01% should be much more respected and sought after and paid better. I mean, that's what we hope for.
One wonders if maybe, there will become something will be necessary, right, to be able to track stuff that's where things are generated. The way, say, we have blockchain right now to track currency. Maybe something will have to evolve or be developed to be able to track creative work, right, or track writing, if so that we can tell this has been generated by a chatbot and it can be ignored, and this has been generated by a human, and and that would actually do what you're saying, Tristan, right, like add value to the human generated work. But it's like, in artificially generated images or videos and things, there's these strange things, like the pixel values follow a power law or something like that. Lots of things, that are made naturally should follow a power law. And I don't know if that's true of words. That might be really interesting to investigate. But artificially generated things, don't have the right distribution of their elements. So I imagine people will be developing tools like that to be able to identify artificially generated content.
Yeah, there are no obvious answers at the moment, but I'm sure it will become more obvious. I think there are online some websites that claim to be able to distinguish, but they're not infallible, and a lot of this chatbot text is kind of emulating real text, so it becomes very difficult to tell. We'll just have to wait and see.
Yeah.
Well, we've had you for just about an hour, Gareth. We just say thank you so much for joining us. And for our listeners, check the show notes. We're going to have links to a few things for Gareth because he's got the website, his blog, and a new book on the way. And I recommend following Gareth on Twitter. He's quite active and humorous, and a lot of good stuff out there. And now I've got to go over that list of 30 essential space operas, Gareth, and pull a couple off my shelf for sure. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure. Thanks, Gareth.
Thank you so much for joining us, Gareth. Maybe we'll chat again in the future. Thank you, listeners, for joining us today. Next week, we are talking about Beggars in Spain by Nancy Kress, and we'll have a bunch of other stuff to talk about on that episode as well. Join us. Thank you. Until next time.